Welcome to the Hashimoto's Doctor Podcast. You're now part of a growing community of people determined to take their health back through education and self-empowerment. But because of the healthcare system today, we don't have access to the types of healthcare that we want. So we have to do things differently. We've got to do things smarter, and we do that by becoming our own advocates. This podcast will give you the perspective and thoughts of one of the world's leading Hashimoto's doctors. So let's get started. Hi everyone, Dr. Shook here. I hope you're doing well today. In today's podcast, what I want to talk to you about is testosterone. And is testosterone making your thyroid problem worse? Is it contributing to worsening of Hashimoto's? And this is a huge issue. This is a huge issue for millions of women. In the United States, the number one endocrine problem is polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. And PCOS is a syndrome where your testosterone levels tend to be more dominant than your estrogen levels, even though you're a female. And we see this occur, and we think that the major mechanism behind it is elevation in blood sugar and spikes in blood sugar and spikes in insulin that change enzyme activity in your steroid hormone pathway. So the pathway of taking basically cholesterol and making it into testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and cortisol. And it changes some of the enzymes that drive more of these hormones down the pathway of testosterone and of androgens, higher DHEA, higher testosterone, higher androstenedione in relationship to your estrogens. So this is a huge issue. I mean, this is the most common, so PCOS, for example, is the most common symptom, or the most common endocrine problem of women in the United States. It's a huge, huge issue. And if we look at it, and basically we're looking at how testosterone in this podcast affects thyroid physiology and function. And it does have a profound effect. High testosterone or a high estrogen can have a significant impact on your thyroid hormone chemistry. And it's something that has to be considered. So if you have elevations in testosterone, well, first of all, you want to have a better idea. It'd be a great idea to know why, right? I mean, and the most common reason that we're going to find amongst women is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And what is the greatest driver of that? It's basically high blood sugar. And the greatest cause of that is, yes, probably diet, but we know that there are a tremendous number of things that also contribute to high testosterone in women. And these are things like higher levels of inflammation. Inflammatory load contributes to changing these enzymes and encouraging greater cortisol production, which in turn leads to higher blood sugar, because higher cortisol, which is your stress hormone, production tends to lead to a process called gluconeogenesis. Basically, you break down stored blood sugar in your liver and muscles and you dump it into the bloodstream, which that's going to be a problem if you have blood sugar related issues. And that would raise insulin, and that would contribute again to greater likelihood of higher androgen production, so testosterone and DHEA and androstenedione. These hormones that, once they become more dominant in women, they create a lot of issues for just the way you feel, the way you function, but it also affects thyroid hormone physiology. So let me kind of speak about the thyroid hormone physiological issues that we're going to see with higher testosterone. So when you have higher testosterone, you can end up having a problem where you don't have as many of the little carrier proteins in your blood called thyroid binding globulins. Now, if you've seen me talk about these in my whiteboard video, which has been seen almost 7 million times, you understand that I talk about these little carrier proteins. This is part of transportation. So you just put this in context. Your thyroid hormone is produced by the thyroid gland. It is then put into the bloodstream and transported throughout the blood to the cells of the body where it's used. So there's a transportation of the hormone. And the transportation is carried out by the thyroid hormone binding itself to something called thyroid binding globulins. thyroid hormone binding globulins, okay? This is the little protein that carries it like a taxi cab through the bloodstream and drops it off where it needs to be used by the cells of your body. So once that's used, once that occurs, and your body then has to have the cells of your body have to have appropriate sensitivity to the hormone, and that's primarily the physiological process as a 30,000 foot overview that has to occur. So what we're talking about, how testosterone can disrupt your thyroid hormone physiology, is through disrupting the transportation. Okay, so higher testosterone levels will tend to decrease the thyroid hormone binding globulins. These transport proteins can decrease the number of these transport proteins, and what that results in is basically you have more of the hormone that's produced by the thyroid free floating and freely available for the cells of the body to use. Now you might think, well, wait, more free hormone available sounds like a good thing. Well, not necessarily. Remember, everything has to be in balance. So when we're talking about some of the consequences, the higher testosterone can actually cause you to have more free floating thyroid hormone, which can create some issues with thyroid hormone resistance, where you have too much thyroid hormone that's freely available and it saturates and soaks the cells of the body, resulting in decreased sensitivity to the thyroid hormone. That's one of the issues that we can see, and it can actually create low thyroid-like symptoms with a certain balance, right? So obviously, if it was the levels were very, very high, then you would have hyperthyroid symptoms. But what we tend to see with higher testosterone levels is that there's less of these little carrier proteins. There's more free floating and free thyroid hormone, free T3, free T4 floating in the bloodstream. And you have increased saturation of the cells with this hormone, and it causes downregulation or thyroid hormone resistance, okay? Which ultimately results in decreased sensitivity to the hormone and more of a likelihood of having hypothyroid symptomatology, so lower thyroid hormone symptoms. So all of this caused by an increase in testosterone. See, everything in the body is connected. That's one thing that I think is critically important to understand, is that everything is connected. Higher inflammatory loads change physiology. The immune response changes physiology. Altered sex hormones changes physiology. Altered stress hormones like cortisol changes physiology. It's all connected. And there are a lot of connections that I'm sure we still don't fully understand, but this is one that we do understand pretty well, and that I'm familiar with and I've seen in practice. And you've got to be aware that this can really disrupt your thyroid hormone physiology, even if you don't have Hashimoto's. This is just one more of the physiological breakdowns that can occur. Now, the other problem with this is, also there's a lot of hair loss with Hashimoto's. There's a lot of hair loss with hypothyroidism. So sometimes, no one ever. I've never worked with anyone that just had one problem. Like, this is purely just the only one issue that you have, and if we can address this, everything is magically better. No, everyone has these layers of issues. So, with the hair loss of hypothyroidism, a lot of people don't realize it, but this elevation in testosterone can cause you to have, for one thing, you can have higher DHT, dihydrotestosterone levels. Okay, dihydrotestosterone is 20 times more potent than just regular testosterone, and what it results in is male pattern baldness. So a lot of women might be losing hair and thinking, why am I losing all this hair? And if you have higher androgens, or if you have blood sugar fluctuations, this is a lot more common than you might imagine. There's more of a hair loss, of more of a male pattern baldness kind of a pattern, I should say, or loss along the crown, and sometimes it's really hard to observe or to know if that's actually what's happening to you until it becomes you have extensive hair loss. So it's always advantageous to do testing to investigate this. I mean, I always recommend that almost in every situation that we investigate sex hormones and stress hormones like cortisol, and we look at immune triggers and a lot of things at one time. People have different opinions on that. I say get data up front, figure out as much as you can so that a specific plan can be put together, because you only have so much time. That's one thing that's kind of, I think people fail to acknowledge, is that we only have so much time. And that means we only have so much time in this life. We only have so much energy with which to follow through on recommendations. So I make recommendations for someone to take supplements or change their life. Well, are you seriously going to go through 3 years, 4 years of trial and error to try to figure out if we can get something right? Or would you rather gather a lot of information up front and try to be as specific as possible to give you a chance to shorten that time frame significantly and feel better faster? I mean, almost everyone wants their time because we can never get it back. It's never something we can get back. So testosterone has a profound impact on thyroid hormone physiology. It is driven by a lot of different problems. And there's some things that I really want to talk to you guys about to optimize your testosterone levels. And you know what? Maybe we should talk about that in my next podcast. What do y'all think? I like to keep these short enough so that you guys can get some usable information. You can learn something quick, but you don't have to be on here for hours on end. So how about this? Join me on the next post. Promise you, I'm going to post how you can consider optimizing testosterone levels in both men and women. Okay, so I'll just tell you right now, like, one of the main things that you guys can do is make sure you're focusing on balancing blood sugar, right? If you have polycystic ovarian syndrome, balancing blood sugar is huge, but there's a lot of other things I'm going to talk about that can drive blood sugar fluctuations, environmental chemicals, and a lot of things that you may not be aware of. So join me on the next podcast, okay? I just don't want this to go too long, and I know I'll go another 10 minutes at least discussing these topics. So I appreciate you guys so much. Remember, as always, I really appreciate you hanging out with me and spending this precious time just listening to me sometimes ramble. I hope this has been helpful. I hope this adds value to your life. And remember, as always, it's my goal to try and change your life. I want to change the world literally one person at a time, because I know if I can improve your health, it's going to improve your families. It's going to impact your family in a positive way. That will translate into a healthier community, and ultimately we can change the world one person at a time. So I appreciate you hanging out with me today. I want you guys to be better educated on your health. I want you to be your own advocates. I want you to be better partners with your healthcare providers, and ultimately live the best life that you can. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really look forward to talking to you again and hanging out with you on the next podcast, where we're going to discuss what? We're going to discuss how we can optimize testosterone in both men and women. Okay? So look forward to talking to you on the next podcast. Thanks. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed hanging out behind the scenes with Dr. Shook. You can also talk with and learn from Dr. Shook through Facebook Live on our Facebook page at the Office of Dr. Brad Shook. Don't forget, you can also get access to our videos, guidebooks, and thyroid programs at www.drbradshook.com. Oh yeah, and don't forget one more thing. We can change the world one person, one family, and one community at a time. Until next time, remember, today is your day, and no one will tell you who you are and what you can be.